Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human cognition.
It's good to be here. This past week, we've been going through sources on a state that feels, well, almost universal at this point, especially for people in these big, hyper-urban environments.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's almost become this accepted part of life, and I think that's exactly what we need to challenge today. What we really want to do is take a hard look at the cognitive mechanics behind that feeling of perpetual mental exhaustion, what everyone just calls burnout.
Yes, or as some of the clinical sources call it, Tuchan-Michalak syndrome. And that name is important. It translates really to the syndrome of being consumed or completely depleted.
So we're not just talking about being tired.
No, not at all. We're dissecting the collapse of the whole internal refueling system. We want to understand why we feel so perpetually empty, and more importantly, how to actually refill the tank before the whole system just fails.
Okay, so before we get into symptoms, let's clarify. This isn't just stress, is it? You mentioned this, mental sustaining energy. What exactly is that?
It's the energy of our executive function, so it's fundamentally cognitive, not physical. The analogy the literature often uses, which I think is quite powerful, is a horse being constantly whipped to run, but with no known destination.
Okay.
But the really critical part of that image is the lack of a designated resting place. In the old world, a han, a known stot, a refuge, where both the rider and the animal could just completely disengage and recuperate.
And in our modern lives, that han, that mental rest stop, it's just gone. We're always on, always reachable.
Exactly. And the brain, just like that horse, eventually it just gives up. It's a form of psychological resignation and internal quitting.
And that quitting comes from what? Just the effort.
It comes from prolonged, intense effort that fails to secure the necessary mental reward to justify the cost.
So you're saying social validation is actually more critical than, say, your salary. That feels
Yeah.
like a big claim, especially in our system.
It is a big claim, but the sources bear it out. We are social animals first. We work for money, yes, but that's only part of the equation. We are wired for validation, for status, for recognition.
The idea of takdirgurme.
Precisely. It means more than just seeing appreciation. It's this deep, public acknowledgement of your effort, your existence. If you put in years of work, you hit every target, but no one ever truly validates it, your internal system starts asking a very logical question.
Why am I doing this?
Is this reward, the money, really worth the cost to my psychological health? And very often the answer is no.
So who's running that cost-benefit analysis inside the brain?
That's the job of the prefrontal cortex, the PFC. It's the executive control system. Think of that old rider and elephant analogy.
The PFC is the rider.
It's the driver or the steering wheel trying to guide this huge, powerful elephant, which is the rest of our brain's emotions and impulses.
And if that driver, the PFC, is forced to work constantly without getting its psychological fuel, no recognition, no genuine feedback,
Its functional capacity just degrades. It literally loses horsepower. It becomes less efficient.
And this is where we have to draw a really sharp line between burnout and clinical depression, right? They can look so similar on the surface.
They can, but the distinction is crucial. Clinical major depressive disorder, that seems to involve what look like semi-permanent changes to the brain's circuitry. It requires sustained professional intervention.
But burnout is different.
Burnout is a fuel supply problem, and this is the hopeful part. It is reversible. The sources are very clear on this. If the person can just break the cycle and get real restorative rest, sometimes even a 5-day holiday is enough to completely resolve it.
It's a resource depletion, not a broken engine.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So when the PFC is running on fumes like that, what's happening neurologically? What does that look like?
Brain imaging shows the prefrontal cortex is working at a bare minimum. But, more importantly, it loses synchronization with the deeper emotional systems.
So can't regulate them anymore.
Exactly. Normally, you get a surge of emotion, stress, fear, even joy, and the PFC steps in to manage it, to make it functional. But when it's offline, the emotions just run wild.
Which is why people in burnout have these extreme emotional swings.
Yes. They can't regulate despair, they can't regulate anxiety, and that leads directly to those dark bottom-of-the-well thoughts. Why am I even here? I wish I could just disappear. The control mechanism is gone.
And modern life just pours gasoline on that fire because that key fuel, social recognition, is so scarce.
It is. Everyone's moving too fast. There's no time for a genuine thank you, let alone a deeper validation. The brain notices that lack of reward and eventually just makes a cold, logical decision.
I'm out. This operation is shutting down.
Precisely.
Okay, so that brings us to let's call it the common coping mechanism. We reach for our phones, the endless scrolling, the short-form videos. If real validation is the fuel, why do these low-grade dopamine hits fail so spectacularly?
It's a qualitative difference, not just quantitative. All pleasure involves dopamine, sure, but the scale here is it's vast. The sources make a great comparison.
I think I remember this one.
They say that a quick digital reward is 4 steps below a plate of dried beans compared to a meaningful life reward. It's just a pipsqueak of pleasure.
So why is it so addictive? Why do we get trapped if the reward is that tiny?
Because it perfectly exploits how the brain's reward system works. It's all about expectation coupled with uncertainty.
The anticipation.
Yes. The system isn't really driven by the content you just saw, but by the possibility of what's coming next. The more uncertain the outcome, the bigger that transient dopamine surge. It's the exact same mechanism that drives gambling.
You're not scrolling because the last video was good. You're scrolling for the chance that the next one might be.
That's it. And the hit you get is tiny. A pipette-blown rush, as one source put it. It's just enough to keep you tethered to the phone, but it does absolutely nothing to restore the PFC.
Contrast that with what you called the high-grade rewards.
Right. Genuine appreciation, achieving a difficult goal, deep recognition from your peers. Those things don't just release a bit of dopamine, they trigger this broad, restorative cocktail of neurotransmitters.
Serotonin, endorphins.
And, crucially, anandamide.
The bliss molecule.
Exactly. The name comes from the Sanskrit word ananda, which means blessed feeling or deep satisfaction. It provides that lasting sense of peace and contentment. It's even in mother's milk. That's the quality of reward you actually need to repair a depleted brain.
And the proof that scrolling doesn't provide it is that feeling we all know, the regret gap.
Oh, absolutely. The moment you put the phone down after an hour of scrolling, you feel that immediate, deep regret, that emptiness. Because the reward was totally insufficient. It was just a distraction that cost you more energy.
Let's talk about a related trap. Motivational content, the hustle culture videos, the affirmation videos, they're everywhere.
This is where psychology and the algorithm meet in a fascinating way.
Yeah.
The algorithms are just serving the subconscious needs of a depleted population.
It's
a perfect mirror. Content for men often focuses on endurance, on whipping yourself into shape. You're weak, do more. Content for women often centers on validation. You are enough, you are wonderful. The algorithm knows this is what you want because it sees where you slow your scroll. It sees what your primal anxieties are.
But just watching this stuff without acting on it is actually dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous. This goes back to a key warning from the Gestalt School of Psychology. Awareness that is not followed by action is regret.
So if you watch 15 motivational videos in an hour,
and you don't do a single thing differently, you've just loaded yourself up with 15 distinct psychological regrets. The brain logs all the things it should be doing against the reality of what it did, which was nothing.
that's a recipe for burnout.
It's a direct path. The key is action. Having 100 ideas is worth 0. Acting on one of them puts a 1 in front of all those zeros. It's about shifting from consumption to execution.
So for the person listening who is recognizing these patterns, the exhaustion, the scrolling, the inaction, what are the big red flags, the signs that they're really heading for a collapse?
Okay, there are 3 critical markers. The first is sleep disruption, but in a very specific way. It's staying up late, binge watching or scrolling because sleep feels like wasted time.
You're trying to compensate for an unrewarding day.
Your brain is desperately searching for some satisfaction before the day officially ends. The second is pervasive cynicism.
Just a deep distrust of everyone.
Yes, you start assuming everyone has bad intentions, that they're trying to deceive you. It's the brain putting up massive defenses because its core operating system is failing. And the third is just loss of enjoyment, anhedonia.
When things that used to make you happy just don't anymore.
Exactly. A big bonus, a promotion, a creative success. If those things feel hollow, that is a flashing red light. The internal warning system is broken.
So to reclaim that steering wheel, we have to look beyond these low-level fixes. The sources get almost philosophical here, talking about different classes of pleasure.
They do. It's a classic distinction. You have low or vital pleasures, which are about survival eating, safety, reproduction. They're essential, of course, but they just keep the biological machine running.
And then you have the high pleasures.
which are uniquely human: art, philosophy, literature, deep scientific thought, creation, genuine altruism. A person who is truly engaged in these high pleasures. They're not going to spend hours doom scrolling. The two lives are just incompatible.
When you only live for the vital pleasures, you're essentially choosing to live like an animal.
An efficient animal, maybe, but not the conscious creative being you're capable of being.
And the most practical way to start making that shift is, what? A radical step in our world.
It is. You have to interrupt the noise. You have to commit to pausing for at least 5 minutes a day to just listen to yourself. No phone, no music, just sit and take notes on what you're feeling. It's the only way to read the body's warning signs.
It's the only way to grab the steering wheel back from the algorithm.
Or from your boss, or from social pressure. It's about reclaiming control.
And all of this leads to what the sources say is the ultimate differentiator between success and failure in beating this. It's the why.
Yes, the defining positive reason. So many people try to implement good routines, cold showers, exercise, journaling, but they eventually fail.
Why?
Because their core motivation is fleeing. I'm doing this to escape burnout. Escape is never a good long-term motivation. It's not sustainable.
So you need a positive goal you're running toward.
You have to define the chase, not I'm running away from this pain, but I am running toward being a more fully realized human. I deserve high-level satisfaction. That's what generates the anandamide. That's the sustaining fuel. The quality of your why determines the quality of your existence.
So the challenge then for you listening is to move past just wanting to be more productive or to escape feeling bad. It's about ensuring every action you take is driven by a genuine, high-level purpose.
Something you truly believe elevates you. And if you invest your precious energy in that one thing, the creative project, the scientific question, the philosophical pursuit, you'll find it brings that real satisfaction, that gratitude, and the low-level digital noise, it just fades away. Find the one thing that truly brings you anandamide. That is where you should be spending your time.